You know that thing where someone asks, "Are you a millennial or Gen Z?" and you pause just a half second too long? Not because you don't know the answer, you do. It's just that the honest answer requires a small footnote. You're technically a millennial, if we're going by year, but you remember landlines. You had a Nokia before you had a MacBook. You know what it's like to be unreachable for an entire Saturday, not as a wellness practice, but just because that was Tuesday. And then one day, somewhere between 16 and 22, the entire world switched interfaces on you, not gradually, violently. People born between 1986 and 1990 didn't grow up with the internet. They grew into it during the most cognitively formative window a human being has. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit right as most of them entered adulthood, they got a second earthquake on top of the first. I still have the email chain where my entire internship cohort realized, over 4 days, one reply at a time, that the jobs we'd been lined up for no longer existed. Nobody called. The positions just quietly disappeared from the website. We're not here to talk about which generation had it worse. We're here to understand what it actually does to your psychology when your operating system gets replaced while you're still using it, and why never fully belonging might be the most valuable thing that ever happened to you. And it starts with something neuroscientists are only beginning to take seriously. There's a concept in cognitive science called a critical period, a developmental window when the brain is unusually plastic, when new systems get laid down at a depth that's almost impossible to achieve later. Language acquisition works this way. So does emotional regulation. So, it turns out, does technological fluency. People who learn to navigate information in a slow, linear, analog environment, books, libraries, one TV channel, one phone line, built a specific cognitive architecture. They developed what researchers call deep attentional processing, the ability to stay focused on a single problem without external input for a sustained period. They learned to tolerate ambiguity without immediately resolving it. They learned to be bored. Then digital came, and for most people, it replaced that architecture. But for individuals whose analog foundation was already solidly built before digital arrived, roughly, people who were preteen or early teen before widespread internet, something different happened. They didn't replace one system with another, they added a second one. This is what linguists call bilingualism at the cognitive level. A true bilingual doesn't translate. They operate natively in two languages. The 1986 to 1990 cohort, who learned to focus before the infinite scroll and then learned to scroll anyway, are cognitively bilingual in a way that people born in 1995 or 1975 simply aren't. The 2008 crisis added a third layer. Developmental psychologists studying post-recession cohorts identified what they call adversarial resilience, the specific adaptability that forms not from stable scaffolding, but from having scaffolding collapse while you're standing on it. It's not the same as ordinary resilience. Ordinary resilience bounces back. Adversarial resilience reconfigures. It's the upgrade that only installs under pressure. Now let's look at what this actually looks like on a Wednesday morning, because it's not always pretty. Stage 1, the inbox that doesn't know what year it is. You're in a Slack channel, responding in real time to 4 conversations, while also checking an email you started drafting 20 minutes ago, while also, somewhere in a small background process, remembering that you genuinely used to read novels, for fun, for long periods, without checking anything. Your brain isn't broken, it's running 2 operating systems simultaneously, and occasionally they interrupt each other. What looks like distraction is actually context switching between 2 authentic modes. The frustration isn't that you can't focus, it's that you remember what it felt like when you could, and that memory creates a standard the environment doesn't always meet. Most people don't experience that tension. Gen Z never had deep focus hardware installed. Older Gen X didn't acquire the full digital fluency layer. You have both, and managing 2 systems is more cognitively expensive than running one. But it's also what makes you the most useful person in the room when the system crashes. Stage 2, the career that wasn't a career. You were told, study hard, get the degree, find the job, stay for 30 years, retire with something resembling dignity. This contract was delivered with complete sincerity by adults who had, themselves, lived inside it. Then 2008 happened. The contract dissolved. The industry your degree was designed to enter either disappeared, consolidated, or pivoted to something that didn't exist when you enrolled. And here's the psychological wrinkle. You weren't just disappointed, you were confused. Because you had genuinely done everything correctly, the map was accurate, the terrain changed. Psychologists call this expectancy violation at the identity level. When the thing you use to define your future self becomes unavailable, it's not just a practical problem. It destabilizes the narrative self. You don't just lose a job category, you lose the story you were living inside. The response, for most of this cohort, wasn't collapse. It was improvisation. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they had already survived one complete world replacement and understood, on a cellular level, that structures are provisional. This is not nothing. This is the entire skill set. Stage 3, the social map that kept getting redrawn. You grew up with a social life that was fundamentally location-based. Your friends were the people who were near you. Relationships formed slowly, through proximity, time, and an absence of other options. Then came social media, and your entire social world became searchable, quantified, permanently documented, and globally available. Younger generations inherited this architecture as native. They never knew anything else. But you built relationships under the old rules, then had to translate them into the new system. And sometimes the translation doesn't hold. You know what it's like to have a friendship that existed entirely in the physical world. And you know what it's like to have one that exists entirely in the digital one. And you can feel, often uncomfortably, that these are not the same thing. This is not nostalgia, it's comparative data. And comparative data, however uncomfortable, is exactly what makes you a better reader of people, institutions, and systems than someone who only has one reference point. And here's where it gets interesting, because that discomfort has a very specific use. There's one thing this cohort does that's worth naming explicitly because it's both a strength and, occasionally, an unnecessary source of friction. You code switch constantly, not just between digital and analog, but between the emotional register of two different eras. You can be fluent in ironic detachment and also genuinely moved by something. You can operate in hyper-connected environments and still know, somewhere in your body, what quiet feels like. Most people pick one. You run both, which means you're also constantly aware of the gap between them. Here's the reframe. That gap isn't a malfunction. It's a measurement instrument. When you feel the specific irritation of, this meeting should have been an email, or this text conversation should have been a walk, that's not a personality quirk. That's your comparative architecture giving you information that someone with only one reference point literally cannot access. You can tell when a system is inefficient because you remember when it worked differently. That's not a complaint. That's a diagnostic tool. And the people who can diagnose a system, not just operate inside it, are the ones who get asked to fix things when the system breaks. Notice it. Name it. It's not nostalgia, it's data. And that's the thing about belonging nowhere. It turns out to be the most interesting place to stand. Every generation gets a story told about it. Boomers were lucky. Gen X was forgotten. Millennials were soft. Gen Z are anxious. The 1986 to 1990 cohort mostly gets skipped in these conversations, which is either insulting or quietly accurate. Because the defining feature of this group is that they don't fit the frame. They're too late for one era and too early for the next. They speak two cognitive languages. They've survived two complete collapses of the world they were told to expect. The word for that isn't lost. You didn't miss both worlds. You're the only one who actually saw both of them. What would you do differently, at work, in relationships, in how you use your own attention, if you stopped treating your in-betweenness as a deficiency and started treating it as a credential?